Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the wonders of the Greater Kruger National Park. You're with WildEarthTV. If you happen to have stumbled across this website and wonder what on earth you're doing, staring at some fool sitting in the wedged into a gap in a jackalberry tree somewhere in the wilds of Africa, stay where you are, don't go anywhere, I shall explain forthwith. You're about to go on a live game drive, an afternoon safari in the Greater Kruger National Park, and we're on a little piece of the Kruger Park called Djuma, 1,500 hectares of untrammeled wilderness wonderland, and we're hoping to find a leopard or some elephants this afternoon. On camera today we have Djuma in his sort of nationalistic hat and coloured rangerish garb. In the control room we have the inimitable tones of Nikki, who's quite sultry, and Tara, who's quite, well, Tara's Tara, I suppose. And then on the other vehicle we've got Scott and Gendré, who are busy trying to track a leopard for your viewing pleasure as we speak. Please remember, driven by the exceptional questions and comments that we get from all of you, people watching our dam cameras, people watching the game drives and sending in great questions. So if you'd like to comment or question, hashtag Safari Live if you happen to be on the Twitter sphere, and questions at WildEarthTV if you want to send us an email. We had an update and from somebody who was watching the dam cam earlier who wanted us to identify a bird. She saw an African harrier hawk, aka Gymnogene, bathing itself, I think, probably having a bit of a drink. I'll show you a picture of it as and when I can extricate myself from this tree. Now you might ask yourself what I am doing in this tree, and you would be asking a fine question, because I am starting to ask myself the same question. Yesterday we viewed a wonderful female leopard called Karula in a marula tree, different from this jackalberry, and I was asked, do they like to lie in trees, first of all, and what trees do they prefer? And I said that on the crest areas, the marula trees tend to be preferred, and in the drainage line areas where we are now, these jackalberries tend to be preferred, so I thought I'd come up and test this one out. I probably look relatively comfortable where I'm sitting. I must tell you that there are various very uncomfortable spikes sticking into me from all angles, to the extent that I'm struggling to hold together the straight and bonhomie face that you currently see before you. Right, Liam, I'm now going to try and extract myself from this tree. I am not holding out great hope for elegance, but we're going to see. I'm probably going to jump, so I'm not sure if you want to perhaps move the camera. Here we go, your first action of the day. Whew. I think I just drove my axis and axle joints together, but that's okay. Not as limber as I quite used to be, you know, advancing age and all that. So our plan this afternoon is to head up here. There is a waterhole close by, and yesterday there were a whole herd of elephants that came down to drink there, and I was hoping to try and find them close by. If not, we're quite close to where we did find the tracks of the beautiful female leopard we saw yesterday, and I'm going to try and find her as well. Here we go. Copy. I believe that you are unable to in fact see me, and that the masterful choreography that I put together for the opening with my erstwhile partner Viam was wasted upon the Twitter sphere. I'm sorry about that. Dreaded gremlins, dreaded technical hitches. We'll hopefully be back with you a bit later. We've recorded them, so you know, should that be the highlight of the drive, which I sorely hope it won't be, you'll be able to see it later. our plan remains. I'll try and talk you through the drive. In fact, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll just go to the top of the hill here, and then we'll have a listening extravaganza, and I'll tell you what I can hear after I've let you listen for a little while. And please remember that today we have the fireside chat, it being a Sunday and all. We obviously often forget that it's Sunday because this day is no different from any other out here. The animals tend to do as they do normally every day. The fireside chat, if you don't know, is a half-hour chat with Scott and I, and we'll be chatting about our highlights of the week. There's some leopard stuff, there's some lion stuff, and there is some other surprising stuff. We're going to have a discussion about lions, and please, if you'd like to send any questions in for the chat, do so now. Get them in early if you don't mind. We're going to be talking about Karula, the leopard. We're going to be talking about lion dynamics specifically in the area. So if you've got your opinions or questions about the lion dynamics, that would be great. And we'll talk generally about lions. And then any other basic questions that you have, please feel free to send through. With any luck, you will actually see us by then and won't be listening to my droning voice rather than seeing my well, less than model-like face. Scott's got the looks, but we can't have everything, I suppose. So we're going to stop here and just try and have a bit of a listen. I'm going to be quiet for the next 20 seconds. So although your screen is black, you will hopefully be able to hear the subtle sounds of the winter midday. There's one lovely bird that's calling now. It's called a Cape glossy starling that went pululu, pululu. It just flew across the front of the vehicle. There's a gentle breeze blowing from the east, and you can probably hear it just rustling through the round leaf teak bushes. A lovely sound. You can hear off in the distance a southern black tit. Bzz, 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 bzz. The sky is perfectly clear. It's about 27 degrees or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't sound right. It's 27 degrees and 78 degrees. Your picture may or may not be back. If it is, you can see the marvelous blue winter low-felt sky that we have. You can see the last of the winter leaves on that Combretum apiculatum tree, just rustling in the gentle westerly breeze that's blowing today. Right, well, I think that's probably enough listening for now. I'm not sure if you can see my face or not, but if you can, I'm most pleased. Just getting an update about that. Apparently it's not quite as easy as all that. If you're on Twitter at all, would you mind sending through a message or on the email to questions@wildearth.tv or hashtag Safari Live? Tell us, first of all, where you are in the world, and secondly, if you can see us and on what channel you can see us. So send us through, please. Can you see us? Where you're watching us in the world and on what channel you happen to be seeing us on, or not seeing us for that matter. Hashtag Safari Live or questions@wildearth.tv. We're going to carry on driving down this road slowly, and I'll tell you what I see. until you're able to see it yourself. The grass is a glorious golden, light golden winter color, a bit like Karula's coat. There's some green wood hoopus calling to either side. Lovely fresh smell in the air. Unfortunately, no tracks of the elephant I was hoping to see coming across onto the reserve, but we're going to go and check the waterhole anyway, and perhaps we'll be lucky. So I'm just going to check down the road. I see something on the road. It might be a shadow. Not the shadow, of course, but a shadow. Is that a shadow or a leopard? Or a branch?
Can't see. Looks like a log.
It does look like a log, but it's very odd for it to be in the middle of the road. Well, it's not moving. Right. We'll press on, keep you posted. So apparently I am not entirely invisible to the world, which is excellent from a psychological and technical point of view. Apparently the most stable platform at the moment is National Geographic, so if you're not on their site, perhaps pop along to their site and you might get a better view. If you're not getting us, we're very sorry, but we are working on the problem. And some lovely answers to where you are in the world: Canada and Texas, northern New York and various other parts of the far-flung human habitation of this great planet. You can also go on to WildSafariLive.com. That apparently is also quite stable. So we're going down the eastern boundary of the reserve. We're going to turn off towards the waterhole just now. And for those of you who are perhaps confused by my continual use of the term just now, in South Africa that means in a little while, not right now. We're also at the point at which the Nkahuma Pride, whose territory centers on Djuma here, which is to our right-hand side, we're at the point at which they crossed east out of the reserve last night. This is where they came across, sort of down this road here, and they disappeared onto a reserve called Torchwood. The Kruger National Park boundary, which is unfenced of course, is not very far from here at all. Probably, as the crow flies, about a kilometer. So that's quite an important thing to notice. So perhaps it's important for me to just reiterate that we're in 4.5 million hectares of continuous wildlife land. So although we can't cross a lot of the boundaries, the animals are free to roam within that entire area. So that's a pretty massive area. It's bigger than Wales. It's bigger than Israel. I think it's about a third the size of North Carolina. I'm just going to talk to Scott quickly. Go ahead, Scott. Scott, I'm heading towards the Buffelshoek Dam, and then I'm going to just work the east here for those trucks at Karula. So, apparently the inevitable Nikki Alston, who's directing tonight, is going to show you a clip of me falling out of a tree earlier. That's what you missed after my introduction. And so I hope you enjoy it, and please have a good laugh at my expense. And we are continuing to drive towards the waterhole. So that's what you missed, everyone. Not sort of Broadway or West End, but you know, the best we can do out here. There's a very peaceful sense to this afternoon, I must say, which sometimes is a good thing, and sometimes I find it tends to lead into an afternoon fairly quiet in terms of animal action. But it's just such a pleasure to be out here. Going to drive a little bit quicker so that we can get to Buffelshoek Dam and just see what's there. And then we're going to turn on and come back in a southerly direction to see if we can't pick up Karula's tracks. I met her for the first time yesterday. Most exciting. Just another huge thank you to everybody who's sent in where they're watching from and how they're seeing us and what they're seeing. It's been extremely helpful, A, and B, really fascinating to see where you're all from. Because I don't think all of you send through questions, and so we wouldn't hear from all of you. And it's lovely to hear that you are watching from various parts of the world, wherever you happen to be enjoying your Sunday or possibly your Monday. I don't think there's anywhere left where it's still Saturday. Thank you, Sharon, very much for your compliment. And Ainter leaves are still hanging on to some of these trees on the crests, but down into the dips. Thank you, Sharon, very much for your compliment. And Ainter leaves are still hanging on to some of these trees on the crests, but down into the dips going to have a quick look here at the waterhole, and then we'll cross over to Scott and see how he's doing. Hello, Connie. Nice question. Nice because it's not so easy to answer. Connie, you want to know how many miles across Djuma? Well, okay, so Djuma is 900 hectares. So if we do that, and it's pretty square, so I can tell you that 900 hectares is 90 square kilometers. And basically what that means is it's roughly 9 by 10 kilometers, 9 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide. And that gives you about 90 square kilometers. And then onto Arathusa is another, I think that's another 600 hectares, 60 square kilometers. And so you can sort of work out the proportions from that. Our average drive, we probably drive between 15 and 20 kilometers. And if you want to work that out in miles, just divide it by 1.6. My brain can't do that while I'm driving. Right, so this little waterhole contains the old bachelor of Biffle's Hook, that hippopotamus you can see that's just surfaced. His erstwhile companion, Princess Daisy, seems to have absconded. I'm not sure what he said to her, but while we ask him and contemplate what was going on in his mind when he said whatever he did to her, we're going to go across to Scott and let's see what he's up to. Just in the background there, sorry, quickly before we cross, there's a beautiful cormorant there, just airing his wings. And they hold their wings out like that when they've been swimming to dry them. And it also helps the filaments, just exactly like what he's doing there, the filaments to realign, so that should he wish to take off at great speed, he can do so. White-breasted cormorant, unusual for this area. And we're just going to go across to Scott now, and we're going to probably head off and see if we can't find tracks of Karula, keeping a good eye out for any possible elephant tracks in the area. We'll see you just now. Good luck. Bon voyage.
Well, hello everyone, and the timing of your arrival was absolutely perfect. You would have seen the impala surging to the side. Now one or two are alarm calling. So let's wait and see what happens here. But while we do, my name's Scott, and it's great to have you on the back of the vehicle with me this afternoon. I'm teamed up with Jean-Ray again on camera, and so far we've been searching for any sign of Shadow, a female leopard that we found and followed for about 2 hours this morning. When we left her, we actually waited with her for about 20 minutes after we finished the broadcast this morning, hoping to get another ranger into the sighting before we moved off. And as he arrived and we left, we were probably only a minute away, she got up and started contact calling, which means she was trying to call her cub, called Sindile. He's approaching a year in age now, and we rushed back into the area in the hope of finding her. The guide had left as she moved, and we didn't have any luck finding her or Sindile, but we're confident she is in this area, or she was in this area later on this morning, so hopefully she hasn't moved too far. And it was really exciting as these impala started alarm calling. I think it could have been triggered by some dwarf mongoose that I heard alarm calling initially, and the prey species will rely on other animals to help notify them of any threats before they get to them. So it's the dwarf mongooses that were alarming at something. I'm not too sure what, but that combined with the fairly windy afternoon has been the cause of them to spook. They all seem to have calmed down again now. That's not to say there isn't a threat nearby, and hopefully Shadow or Sindile is, but I feel we may have our work cut out for us. I've done a small walk in the area hoping to find them, but didn't have any luck, and have driven around quite extensively. And then we decided to come and spend time with this herd of impala. It's the same herd of impala that She was actually attempting to hunt this morning. She didn't have a full-blown go at them, but she was certainly interested in them. So that's something that I thought would be useful for us to do. And I'll come and park next to some potential prey and be silent. That way we can listen. And just like we heard the mongoose's alarm calling before the impala did, we could hear other animals in the area, francolin or monkeys, that may let off an alarm and lead us to the location of these leopard. Anyway, let's try and reposition and take a closer look at these impala. They are such pretty antelope, and they do seem fairly relaxed with us. You may notice I look a little bit different to yesterday or this morning. I have sheared off the woolly mess on my head as well as my face, so it's the same guy you saw this morning if you were on the sunrise safari. Now, I'm kind of in the middle of the herd. It's split up into two different sections, but I'm hoping either of the groups on either left or right of us will try and join in with one another. It appears like we may have the herd on the left heading back to the herd on the right, but hard to say. You'll notice the small little black puffs of fur on the back of that impala's legs, and quite interestingly, those are metatarsal glands which secrete a fine liquid when the impala will run off from potential predators, and when they bombshell and scatter, they leave a trail of scent in all directions depending on where they've run, and this allows the herd to rejoin with one another. So it's quite a unique gland. Not all of the antelope will have it, but it is one that the impala are lucky enough to have. And because they do occur in such big herds and it's an important part of their social structure, it's important that they can reunite when need be. And here, as I guessed, we are lucky in that we're getting a lot of impala coming through this open and clearing to, again, consolidate with the rest of the herd. And oh, there's one interesting one here. She's the one on the back left, Jandre, coming into shot now. The next one, if you zoom into her shoulder blades, you'll notice she's got a very small white spot, which is very unique. And I've seen her once or twice before, and look at that. Isn't that strange? That's one very special impala. The rest all look identical, but occasionally you get these genetic throwbacks causing slight differences in coats or sometimes horn formation. Well, I just got a tweet through from Looking for Lions, and they're interested to know if there's been any sign of the Nkuhuma pride this morning. And no, there were tracks of them east of Djuma, but nobody managed to locate them. So we're not sure on the exact status of that pride, but they should all be okay. It is important to mention, though, if you weren't on the Sunrise Safari, the Birmingham Boys, a coalition of 5 male lions, are just north of us at Djuma. They're lions that we used to see for kind of the months of November and December and January. But since then they've been further north of us in the Manyaleti Game Reserve. And it'll be wonderful if they come back onto the property. They are buffalo killing machines. And it'll be great to see how much they've grown in the months that they've been gone. They're all fairly young, but are adults. So they haven't quite established their own territory yet, but will be in the very near future. Well, good afternoon, Senis, and it's very good to have you with us on this wonderful herd of impala this afternoon. Senis is interested to know, will impala alarm call at us if we're on foot walking through the bush? Typically, no, they won't. They may run away from us, but they won't feel it necessary to alarm call. That is, however, if we are walking upright. If we were to drop down on all fours and kind of creep through some thick bush, we could possibly confuse them with another predator, and then they may let off an alarm call. But walking around normally, I've never had impala alarm call at me. Interestingly enough, sometimes wildebeest will alarm call at people, but other than that, most of the other animals will just run away or take a look at us, but without letting out their natural alarm call if they see predators. Good question, and thankfully we are fortunate in that impala and most of the other animals don't feel the need to attack us on foot. Even though they're small, a male impala with those horns, if he wanted to, he could quite easily cause huge damage to us as humans, and that's one of the smaller antelopes that we have out here. So thankfully they don't realize their own strength and power and speed, because us as humans are quite pathetic in terms of power, strength and speed relative to animals of a similar size to us. I guess our brains have taken preference in growth and not so much our bodies as we've evolved over the years. Impala are fortunate. You can see this one grazing on grass, but they are mixed browsers, which mean they can both graze on grass and also feed on leaves, and this mixed diet that they have is what allows them to be one of the most successful herbivores in this area and throughout many parts of Africa. Not being not a fussy animal out here definitely pays, especially on a drier year like we're experiencing now. It's not usually this dry this early into the winter, and the impala with their varied diet will be in a better off position than other animals that will be more specific, like kudu and inyala, for example, who will almost strictly browse. Having said that though, kudu will, and have been known to, as well as inyala, also do a fair amount of grazing if need be. Okay, well, as great as it is sitting here with this herd of impala, a lot of them have moved off into what is quite thick vegetation close to us, so we may leave them and do a loop around the general area in the hope that Shadow and Sindile may have popped out of their hiding place, and then we'll see what happens next. Well, I've just got a very interesting comment through from Inga. Thank you for sending this through. Now, Inga has noticed on horses, when they get injured, or flesh is kind of a flesh wound and skin is removed from the horse, it will glow back white. So it is possible that that impala had a small chunk of flesh taken out of her back, or a wound there, and now the hairs have grown back white. That's certainly possible. So thanks for pointing that out, Inga. Wouldn't it be interesting to know if that was the case, and if it was, what caused the injury? Because it's quite peculiar position there in the center of her shoulder blades. Interesting. Good afternoon, Heidi, and it's great to have you on board. Heidi would like to know if we ever see any albino antelope out here, and not in all my years have I seen one, and typically albinos will not survive the initial parts of childhood, and it's very rare to actually get true albinos in the wild. What is more common though is for leucistic which is a recessive gene that causes pale pigmentation to occur, so they may appear white, and that goes for an animal like white lions. They're not albinos, they're leucistic. And you also get black leopards in Africa, as well as leucistic leopards, that are either melanistic, being darker, so black, or leucistic, being whiter, and a much lighter shade of color. So that we do get from time to time, but it is very rare, and typically they don't survive and get picked off. Well, we're in for a treat here. We're going to have a look at one of my favorite birds. I'm just going to try to pick the best spot for us. This will probably do for now. And there's a flock of helmeted guinea fowl, which you can see feeding through this open field. They're really pretty birds with a bizarre looking head, bright blue with that strange keratin helmet growing out the top. Very pretty feathers, you'll notice. Well, because these birds spend a lot of time on the ground, they have become incredibly fast runners, and will, especially when they're in thick bush, will often prefer to run away from predators than fly. They're not the fastest flying birds, but they can run the 100 meters in well under 10 seconds. So you could put these birds against the fastest man on earth on a 100-meter track, and the bird would win, which would be a really funny race to watch. And it would be interesting to see which bet people would choose, the bird or the fastest man on earth, having not known this fact, because I certainly am not convinced I would bet a lot of money on a chicken-like animal beating the fastest man alive, but it would happen. Just going to reposition quickly. Good afternoon, Patty in Michigan, and it's good to have you with us. Patty is interested to know whether or not we can collect any artifacts that we found out here, and yes, we can, but it is frowned upon. Patty says this because she stumbled across a beautiful guinea fowl feather when she was on safari, and you know, to pick up the odd feather I don't think is going to cause any major damage or disturbance to the ecosystem and the environment, but it is best to leave as much as possible behind. But things like feathers and the odd bone, or anything in very small quantities, I guess, is kind of acceptable. But you do, in an ideal world, want to leave as much behind as possible, because it will often be reabsorbed back into the nutrient cycle. There's another pretty bird that I would like to show you as these guinea fowl disappear, and it's just on the right of the vehicle here, Jean-Ray, and it's just popped up there onto a branch. It was a bird you may have heard calling a few seconds ago, and it's called the yellow-billed hornbill. It's just over my shoulder, sitting in this bush over here, and we're a little bit far away, but I want to see what it does next before making our next move. You'll notice it's got a very big and bright yellow bill. And off it goes. At this time of the year, I've noticed they're feeding a lot on small termites, and they get to them by often flipping over old pieces of dung that the termites have started to break down. And I'm guessing that's what it may be doing down there. There's not too many other insects around at this time of the year. Hello, Donna. And Donna's interested to know if anyone eats these guinea fowl. And yes, they are eaten, and they are quite tasty. I've eaten them myself. And you'll often find there are areas that farm them almost domestically for the purpose of eating. So yes, you can. They've interestingly enough got red meat though. They don't have white meat like a chicken. So that's one major difference that I didn't expect the first time I ate guinea fowl. We're going to carry on. The birds seem to have had enough of us, so we're not going to force the issue. And now we're going to do a loop around and see if there's any sign of Sindile and her mother, his mother. Well, I've just heard a great recipe from James if you ever would like to cook a guinea fowl. He says what you do is you get a big pot and then place the guinea fowl in the pot, and on top of the guinea fowl you place a big heavy rock. Then put the lid on and cook it for a few hours, take the guinea fowl out, and then eat the rock. So he obviously doesn't think too highly of feeding on them, but with a lot of wild animals, if they're not prepared properly, they can be very tough. So it requires culinary excellence in order to make a lot of wild game into a tasty treat. Got a question from Ginny. Hello, and thanks for sending it through. If any of you would also like to send questions through, it's really easy. You hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or send a question through to questions@WildEarthTV. Sorry, I nearly came unstuck there. Ginny's interested to know, when will the female impalas start showing signs of pregnancy? Probably in the next 2 months we may start seeing a small bump, 2.5 to 3 months maybe. But to be honest, I'm not exactly sure. That's a bit of a guess off the top of my head. Even just before they pop, they don't look hugely swollen, and that's often the case with a lot of the herbivores because they purposefully give birth to underdeveloped young. If they were to carry their babies in them until they were far larger, it would be safer for the youngster if it was born at a more developed stage. But then the mothers would all run the risk of being caught carrying this huge baby around. So it's a fine balance between raising the child enough, or the calf enough to a point where it can be able to run away within a few hours of being alive, but not being too burdened by the pregnancy to not escape prey. It is going to be great that we've encompassed from the rutting period all the way to the next lambing season, and I can't wait for it. We didn't sadly get any impala births in November and December last year, but we managed to film 5 live wildebeest births. I saw my first wildebeest birth on it was actually my first drive in late November. So fond memories of that time of the year. The bush is a very, very different place then. It's lush and green. Lots of clouds often fill the sky. It's really hot and humid. And there's lots of babies around as well as migratory birds. So a lot more birds and insects. So all in all, a lot more life and color during the summer. So what I'm going to do is I want to show you a tree where shadow was basically last seen this morning. It's a dead knobthorn tree, and you can just see it out there in the distance, and she was right below that. So she actually, when we left the sighting, Craig, who was in the sighting with her said she stopped and actually came back towards where we parked now when she was calling out for Sindile, her cub. So we are going to continue to work this area. She could have reunited with him and then moved off quite a distance from here, or she could simply be lying under the shade of a bush nearby that we just can't see to. So this morning, and give you an idea of the proximity to where we left her to where she started calling for her cub was. The time I've seen them reunite was once, and it was actually, we were actually with Sindile, the young male, and he was up a tree as there were two hyenas that chased him upwards, and we heard him return a contact call. We didn't hear her call, but he actually moved quite a long distance, about a quarter of a mile, before he reunited with her, but he could hear her call from all that way. So it's also, and part of this, what makes this tricky is that even though she may leave him in any given area, he will wander off and move around within a fairly large area, possibly a half-a-mile radius of where she was left. Got a question from Kathy in New Durham, and Kathy's got some birds and whether we have any birds that will change plumage from the summer to the winter months. And yes, they're certainly a lot more brightly colored than their winter plumage. A lot of the small weaver birds, months. I'm just trying to think of what other birds do, but I've gone completely blank. But there will be a lot. For the life of me, can't even think of one good example. But I know it does happen, and if you just give me some time, what I'll maybe actually do is just page through my book a bit. Wattled starlings are one that change, I'm fairly certain. Now, this picture here, it's quite small, but you may notice that the bird can either have a yellow patch around its eye or a bright pink patch around its eye, and it can change within seconds. I've seen them landing in trees, and you must keep a close eye out because you'll see it flying with a yellow face, and as it lands it could make it pink, or vice versa. So really interesting. We actually managed to capture that on some Safari Live shows not too long ago. So that's an interesting change. And really interesting that there was Kathleen who also saw this bird a little bit earlier on the Djuma cam and wanted to know what it was. Well, there we go. Didn't we get lucky? Logging on and having a look at the Djuma waterhole cam if you'd like to see this really pretty bird. While it takes me an eternity to find it in the book, but we will get there eventually. There we go. There it is. So the bird in the center with the red and black beak is what's waiting for you on the Djuma waterhole cam. And why don't you guys tell us whether it's a male or a female? I'll show you how to distinguish now. What you can do is look at the yellow wattle just below the base of the beak. That's indicative of a male, and he's got a dark eye. The female lacks the wattle under the beak and has a bright yellow eye. I have just been told though that the zoomy controlling that waterhole cam has now moved the camera off the bird, so you might have to sit around a bit if you'd like to see it, or beg and plead him or her to go back there. Okay folks, well, I'm sure a lot of you have had enough of my bird talk, and for those of you who have, there's good news, because we're going to cross over to James and we'll see you all a little bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jiga. We are bumbling around in the darkness here, like, well, I don't know, as Biam said, we've been driving around this block for a while, and he said, do you think a wild goose is harder to find than a leopard? To which I chortled merrily and then said, and then I obviously slapped him about the head because he was being facetious. I didn't really. We've come up with nothing. There are no... So the tracks go into the block. I suspect they've gone east out across the boundary, but because of the amount of traffic and animal movement there was on that boundary last night, it seems to me that she's probably gone east. So, sorry about that. Not much I can do about it. The whims of the leopard are much like the whims of, well, a recalcitrant person, really. There's nothing you can do. We're going to go down here. We've checked for elephant tracks. An elephant herd was seen further on, but they've also crossed north. So Djuma is not flavor of the month right now with the animals. But who knows, we may well be lucky. So we're going to go down towards the drainage line areas and see what else we can pick up over there. I believe you were chatting with Scott about birds that change colour. One of which you saw, well, one of whom you saw today. The African harrier hawk, which we were asked about at the Djuma waterhole, I'm not sure if Scott told you this, it doesn't change colour completely, but its face does change colour when they breed. They go from yellow, they've got a very kind of pretty yellow face, and it turns very red just before breeding season. Now as you see, we've come off the crest, where all the trees tend to be leafless, and we're getting down into the more sort of sodic areas where these guarri trees are growing. That's most of the green that you can see here at the moment. And what I'm looking for, I read the other day that the guarri bush makes a very effective dye, the roots. And so I'm going to try and find some roots that we might be able to extract some dye from, but I don't want to chop down an entire tree, certainly not on camera. And so if we can find some roots, we're going to pull it out, and then I just want to see if it really does work. A lot of these things that you read about, you can't really be sure of. And certainly some of the medicinal properties, I'm not really prepared to try in the absence of a medical professional. I often think sometimes they're kind of made up by the people who write the books.
Hello.
Just want to quickly pick a piece of bush here. This piece of bush here, while not being overwhelmingly fascinating, is quite interesting. It's the same tree that I had when I was sitting in that tree for the introduction, which I was going to tell you about, but you weren't able to see me, so I didn't tell you about it. It's called Rus Gwenzii, And what it does is it's got a spike on it, and that it's one of these unusual things. There are very few really poisonous plants out here, but this thing, if you get scratched while you're chopping it down or something like that, it does tend to poison the skin, and you come out in quite nasty welts. So if you come across that, when you happen to be knocking about in the bush in Africa, be careful of it. Don't try. The marvels of the trees around here. Fine memory you have. You say a few weeks ago I was talking about the spiny bone apple, and is it the same as Gardenia spinosa, which the spiny bone apple, and he looked about as entertained as a child might when told to check the growth rate of the home lawn. Catanarigum spinosa is bone apple, Raisa. I've actually only ever seen one, and that's the one that I showed you the other week. Stunning bird there. Can you get him, Kim? Do you think? The bob? The bob. In the winter time, or he's colorful. He and she are colorful all year round. Beautiful black, white, yellow. Well, they're easy to spot, first of all, and their behavior is quite interesting. They, especially some of the helmet shrikes, what they do is they will nest together. It's a bit like a wild dog pack where there's a dominant pair, and they'll nest, and they'll raise some babies, and those babies will stay with them for the year while they raise the next brood, and then the yearlings will go off on their own and try and form their own flocks, and so the process continues. So we've got a few of those. The most common one here is the grey-headed helmet shrike. What's that? Liam was just stretching his hand. I thought he'd spotted a leopard.
Full of grease.
Full of grease. Let's see. Patty from Rochester, New York, you asked me a question that's going to get both me and Viam into trouble. You want to know, are there any animals that we see at any of the cameras or on these game drives that we might eat, or that any of the local people might eat? Patty, not from the reserve, no. I mean, not unless we were poaching, which none of us are. But there are certainly, venison is very popular out here, and Impala venison is pretty good eating. Impala is actually farmed in a lot of areas, and it's very it's great farming because it's it's organic meat. It eats only grass, and it also doesn't have the environmental ill effects of cattle farming, for example. And then on the odd occasion there are a few butchers where, on private farms sometimes animals are culled, and you can buy wildebeest and you can buy kudu and that sort of thing. It's not the most delicious meat always, but it makes very good what we call biltong. And there are a few things in South Africa that in the rest of the world would be considered sort of starvation diet, that here we consider delicacies. One of those things, of course, is biltong, which we love very much, and it's dried meat, which in America is called jerky and eaten by desperate cowboys, as far as I understand it. And then the other thing, of course, the most bizarre form of South African food, which I've mentioned before, is something called the rusk. Now, the rusk is a piece of stale sweet bread, and by stale I mean stale to the point of being so rock hard you can't get your teeth into it. And I think it's a throwback to the Great Trek, when the courageous Boers were coming over the mountains in their ox wagons with very little in the way of supplies, and I'm sure baking fresh just as the afternoon progresses. It's a lovely afternoon. There seems to be no heavy weather systems in the area, so it's very quiet and very peaceful and just very pleasant to be out here. Liam, can you just go into the top of the tree there?
What's the nest?
There's a nest there, yeah. Can you hear that? This tree is called Balanites mogami, or the torchwood or green thorn. And its claim to fame, of course, is the seed, which is supposed to have a flammable oil in it. Liam, are you, perhaps, have you got a lighter on you? If not, don't fear.
No.
He doesn't. As the torchwood fruit is supposed to burn, and I've tried it a few times and made a total fool of myself most times. But I won't try it again now. So it's called the torchwood because of the very flammable oil, and that oil is also used to kill fish. So if you want to catch fish and you're too lazy to get a fishing rod, or you don't have one, you can squeeze the oil out of these fruits, throw it in a small pond, and it will kill the fish. I've heard some kudu alarm calling to the right-hand side here. Quite far away to the west. They're sort of in that drainage line, I think between Gowrie Dam and that drainage line. Okay, we're going to turn around here, everybody. If you lost us briefly, I'm sorry about that. These things I'm failing to understand. But, you know, that's how it goes. Solar flares or attacking Martians or various other astrological or astronomical phenomena. Who knows? But we are back now. Kudu alarm calling basically where I'm facing, but quite a distance from here, probably around Gowrie Dam. So we're going to head towards there and just follow the length of the drainage line there and see if we don't come up with something. It's very faint, so you wouldn't have heard it. Unless the microphone had been facing there, I don't think you would have picked it up. And in case you don't know what a kudu sounds like when it's alarm calling, it doesn't squeal or scream, it goes, oh! Oh! How's that, Liam? Yeah. And the nyala does a very similar sort of thing. So all the tragolaphids, which are nyala, kudu, bushbuck, they all bark. So much so that they can be confused with baboons. Just going to drive a little bit quicker. Hello, Patty in Michigan. Patty has read my book. Thank you, Patty, for reading my book. I appreciate that a great deal. I hope it gave you a laugh. You want to know what pup is? Pup, basically, Patty, is maize meal porridge. And it's these sort of staple diet of most of the rural population of South Africa. It's not particularly nutritious because of the way it's so refined, but when people grow their own maize and make their own maize porridge, it tends to be a lot more nutritious, and it's a really important part of the diet out here because it's relatively cheap, and obviously we have a lot of poor people in South Africa, and that's basically what they eat. To liken it, it's a little bit like polenta, basically. It's most delicious with lots of salt, butter, cream, and sugar. But you can't eat too much of it that way, or you won't be long for this world. So all around here, the villages outside the reserve, in summertime when there is rain, and the rain sometimes fails obviously, they will grow fields full of maize, full of white maize. It's not the yellow corn maize, it's a sort of off-white color, and they'll grow it in the fields and then reap it at the end of summer, and various people will have grinders. They don't tend to grind it too much by hand anymore, but some people do, and they'll grind it up and try and store it for as long as they can before they buy the stuff that the I would say verging on unethical maize meal companies in South Africa feed them. The white maize that you buy tends to be bleached, literally bleached, because no maize is actually pure white, and they take all the good stuff out and send that off to animal farms, and the people tend to get the worst stuff. So when they grow their own, it's much better, and you can actually see a difference in people's health during the summer months or the end of summer when they've got their own food. Right, I'm just going to switch off and listen here. This is the drainage line round about where I thought I heard the kudu alarm calling. Hello, Bonnie in Pennsylvania. You want to know if people will ever eat things like lions and leopards and cheetahs, etc. There are a few people out here who I know who have tasted such things, but not by default, no. They tend to be, eating a carnivore can be quite toxic apparently, because it's sort of 3 down the chain of food. It's a tertiary feeder. And apparently they don't taste very good. You can, there's some restaurants in Africa where you can buy lion meat. Well, you certainly used to be able to, which I think is a bit of a foul practice. But apparently it tastes pretty rank, and I can imagine that it would, the taste of a carnivore would be pretty awful. So no, it's not a common thing for people to eat carnivores out here at all. What's interesting, Bonnie, is that just while we sit here and listening, I can't hear any further alarm calls, so I'm just going to sit a bit longer and chat through this topic with you. In South Africa, often a lot of people who are interested in conservation talk about the effects of local people on game reserves, and we tend to think about the fact that game reserves were introduced because of the effects that local people had on them and the local wildlife, when in actual fact local people around here, rural people, have had an almost negligible effect on wildlife populations. Yes, now there are far more people than there ever were, but back in 1926 when the Kruger Park was first proclaimed, and the Sabi Game Reserve in 1902 before that, the reason there were no animals here were because the colonialists came in with their guns and they started hunting meat and ivory commercially, and that had a tremendous effect on wildlife populations in the area. And unfortunately the local people then tended to get excluded from a resource that they used to use fairly sparingly in terms of catching the odd impala and catch the odd kudu to eat. Then when proclamation of game reserves happened, local people got excluded from their natural resources that they used to use, and it's created a very much better now, but it certainly started off as a very antagonistic relationship between conservation and local people. And a lot of my research was in that kind of conflict zone, and it's a lot better than it was. But remember, it's always struck me, when I was a child, I thought of conservation as being part of our sort of way of preserving the nature from local people who, yes, they need to eat, but there are too many people around the place. And in actual fact, the more the facts came out to me, the more I realized how commercial hunting with firearms is the whole reason that a whole group of people have been excluded from a natural resource they've been using for centuries. It has to be done now, otherwise, everything would be destroyed because there's so many people. But it's a difficult balance to maintain. But not a lot of lion and leopard eating going on out here. Can't hear anything at the moment. We're going to carry on to the next lip of the drainage line and see if we can't pick anything up there. Hello, Sandy. You want an update on the Styx male. Now, for those of you who don't know what on earth Sandy is going on about, the Styx males are two males that are part of a pride called the Styx Pride, and it's pretty complicated with the lion dynamics at the moment, especially as we're not seeing them all the time, and that Styx Pride is split up. Sandy, I haven't heard anything about them for a while. I do know, I spoke to somebody from Londolozi today. These Styx males seem to have started to be chased around by some more adult males that have come in from the Kruger Park in the south, but I don't know more than that, I'm afraid. I'm in constant contact. We were going to do a big presentation on the maps of the lions' distributions this week at the Fireside Chat, and we'll go through some of it today, but it's actually turned into a far more complex discussion. So I'm gathering information from all around, and I don't want to make a mistake about who's what and where, because, for example, somebody who sees a male on Mala Mala might call it a Styx male, then it pictures up the next day on Simbambili, and he's never seen it before, so he gives it another name. Now suddenly we've got the same line with two different names, and we don't know who's doing what and where. So I'm trying to correlate it all from the area, and then at some stage we'll put up a big map at the Fireside Chat, and we'll actually draw exactly who's what and where and how. But the lions are in big turmoil, and we'll discuss that further today during the Fireside Chat.